the Qigong was really worked well, especially out in nature, man. Like I was doing some other interesting, like just experiments, and I would even just go and sit outside. Sorry, go and sit inside, take a reading, do a little bit of like even 3 minutes worth of Qigong, and then sit outside. The difference that that made to the HRV, I mean, it was jumping up like 100% sometimes, and that's not
Oh,
normal. You know, it's. I mean, I took it across the board to like real like experts, like global experts in the field to be like, what's going on here? What's happening when we're outside that's causing this to happen? Because the kit I was using was all
mm,
pretty decent stuff, and they're not sure. You know, I spoke to like Clint Ober and Ben Greenfield, and Jay Wiles was also working
oh,
with Greenfield. He taught me a lot, you know, and they're we're not 100% sure to pinpoint exactly what's going on there, but there's something happening outside, man. It's very interesting. And when you combine
mm,
it with the Qigong, when you combine it with Oxygen Advantage, kind of style, light, slow, deep breathing, when all that's which Qigong will, you know, be doing anyway, when when you do that together and you compile it over time, it has a really big benefit on how we handle stress for our lives, you know. And I think the more people can have these tools to see the benefit of this stuff, hopefully the more and more people are going to be getting involved because it's a big one, you know, and it does improve quality
mm.
of life.
All right. Well, welcome. Today I have my good friend and colleague, Andrew Ritchie. I met Andrew for the first time in Scotland. We were running a Qigong retreat at his basically his castle in Scotland on a beautiful and very cold Scottish loch. Um, and what I didn't know when I signed up for a retreat there was he is an Oxygen Advantage Breathwork instructor. He's actually one of the advanced instructors, so he instructs instructors in the Oxygen Advantage. If you haven't heard of that, it's based on the theory of CO2 tolerance that has been popularized by Patrick McEwen, who founded Oxygen Advantage, also James Nestor, who wrote the book Breath, which was very popular a few years ago, or if anybody knows the Buteyko method of breathing. These are all based on the idea that you actually want more CO2 in your body, not less generally, which is very counterintuitive to most of us who've grown up in science class and heard how CO2 is a poison and you want to get rid of as much of it as possible. And then maybe went into yoga class or Qigong class and we're told you're supposed to be stretching your lungs with as big of breaths as possible to expand your lung capacity because it gets rid of more CO2 and brings in more oxygen. And so all these ideas might be actually exactly opposite to what you want. And that's what some of these science-based breathing techniques in recent years have been unveiling for us. So Andrew, I got to meet him in Scotland, and he helped coach my students who I brought there to his Scottish castle in some of these techniques. And everybody loved him so much, I thought it'd be fun to film a little mini course for YouTube with him. So he co-taught on some YouTube videos. We just launched the first one about a week ago. So you can check that out. I'll link that below. And then I thought it'd be fun to bring him on to talk more in depth about the sort of science behind these techniques, how it integrates with Qigong and breathing and Qigong or yoga or sort of more movement arts maybe. And then he also has some interesting work that he's doing with HRV, heart rate variability recently that I wanted to pick his brain about too. So thanks so much for coming on, Andrew, and talking to my YouTubers.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to get the opportunity to come on and just chat about stuff that we're both very interested in. Thanks again for having me at the retreat. What was that, like nearly, what will be 2 years in September, I guess, and looking forward to seeing you again
No,
for the
it was
retreat.
only a year ago.
Oh, was it a year ago? Sorry, mate. Time goes
Yeah,
by so
yeah.
quick, doesn't it?
Well, the
Yeah,
longest year of my life, but
it flies by.
I'm
I know. I was
surprised
thinking
to hear
that.
it
I
was
was
as
like,
long
was it
for
one
you.
or was it two? So much going on. So no, man, it was such a pleasure to
Yeah.
be there and to deliver some sessions for your students. And yeah, looking forward to doing it again soon. I'm looking forward just to chatting a little bit about the kind of principles of the oxygen advantage and how they can be integrated into qigong or movement practices of all kinds and just daily life to really enhance breathing efficiency and all of the the fantastic things that can bring too, because there definitely is a real tie between the principles of the oxygen advantage and qigong, and it's just so great that we're getting the opportunity to explore it because I think it does go a lot deeper than is being currently kind of found and explored. So it's great to be kind of looking at that with you, Nick. Thanks very much.
Yeah, awesome. So For those who aren't familiar, could you explain the? Sorry, my 1-year-old is laughing in the background. I don't know
Oh,
how
don't
audible
worry,
that
mine
is.
will probably come in soon too.
Yeah. She you just give the summary of like what are the underlying principles of the oxygen advantage? What is this sort of the paradigm shift that we're talking about here?
Yeah, okay, great.
And
Well,
how is that different than what people might be used to hearing in
yeah,
yoga or qigong or things like that in
yeah, for
contemporary
sure.
time?
Yeah, well, the oxygen advantage, it focuses on, I guess you could say, kind of three sort of main pillars. We look at the biomechanics of breathing, a lot to do with posture there. So the link in for Qigong is obviously massive within that. We also look
Yeah.
at the psychophysiological aspects of breathing, how breath affects the mind and how the mind affects the breath. And there's some interesting pieces where HRV can kind of play in with that and looking at stress and how breathing affects all of that. We also look a lot at the biochemical aspect of breathing. And this kind of alludes to a little bit about what you were talking about before, about the whole carbon dioxide tolerance kind of thing. So yeah, that's the kind of three sort of main principles: biomechanics or biochemistry, and also the kind of psychophysiology of breathing. And we look at them from a lot of different angles, always kind of bearing them in mind. One of the most kind of key pieces of it is that we talk to is the benefit of breathing through your nose as well, because you know the nose was built for breathing. And for anybody that has followed or read James Nestor's book, follows any of the Oxygen Advantage stuff, you can see how nasal breathing is such an important piece of what we teach, because it just hits on so many of these or so many benefits. You know, the nose does so much for breathing that the mouth doesn't do. So we focus a lot on that. If we break down the kind of principles, you know, we've got the biomechanics of breathing. The nose is really going to help you with the biomechanics of breathing, because by using the nose, you impose more resistance onto the breathing system and the diaphragm, so it works it more efficiently, almost just by the
Mm-hmm.
way that the
To the
nose
smaller
has smaller
hole.
smaller holes, man. You know, so they just and one of the
Yeah.
techniques that I like to do with students a lot that we will have done when they all came over was, you know, you just get a student to put one finger over one nostril and breathe, and they can notice the diaphragm having to work harder because they've put more resistance onto the breathing muscle. You can then get them to place another finger over the other nostril, just leave a tiny little gap. They'll notice the diaphragm really have to work hard there. And that starts to click with them that, okay, well, if I increase the resistance, my breathing apparatus, if you like, has to work a little bit harder. We can train it more efficiently that way. And everyone knows that, like, what's a bigger hole, your mouth or your nose, you know? So that kind of starts to click people into thinking, okay, well, if I'm breathing with my nose, maybe mechanically, I'm going to be breathing more efficiently. That's the big one. Because if we're breathing mechanically more efficiently, our core is going to be working more efficiently, our posture is going to be better, our
Mm.
movement is going to be better, and you can really point that almost in any direction that you want to go. I think it works seamlessly with Qigong, just the nature of the movements and all the postural pieces that you teach lean very well into that side of things. So that's a good one. Just breathing through your nose to ensure that, you know, mechanically you're breathing better, and then your kind of posture and your form and so many movements and so through so many movements is better. So that's good. We look to the biochemistry. This is a one that you mentioned earlier on. It's all about that kind of talking about the relationship between carbon dioxide and oxygen. Like you'd said, man, when we kind of got taught a long time ago about carbon dioxide, the idea is, or for the most part, for the masses, if you like, the idea is that the carbon dioxide is like a waste gas, that it doesn't provide any benefit to the system, or just that people aren't very aware of kind of the benefit that it can provide. It's changing a bit now. But carbon dioxide is a super important piece within the whole system. And I can talk through it kind of briefly. But what carbon dioxide acts as, so the gas that we exhale, it acts almost like a key to unbind the oxygen from the blood. All of our blood is deeply saturated with oxygen. We've got lots of oxygen basically within our blood, our hemoglobin, they call it. But what we want to be able to do is use that as efficiently as possible. And in order to do that, we want to have more carbon dioxide present within our blood. And what that'll do is it'll help unbind the oxygen from the blood and get it into the tissues and the cells so it can be utilized efficiently. Does that make sense? That if we're breathing out of our, if we're breathing out our mouth, dumping a lot of the CO2, we're not into the tissues. So having more carbon dioxide present there is important. And by breathing through your nose, you don't dump as much as you would for chemical efficiency through nasal breathing. Does that make sense? Sometimes that can sound a little bit, well, science heavy.
Well, it makes sense to me, but I've been reading about it for several years. It sounds sensible to me. Okay. So essentially, the presence of CO2 in the blood is what unbinds the oxygen from the blood to get to the other tissues. And the other tissues is basically where we want it to go. The blood is just to transport it. So your brain's not getting oxygen. Your other muscles aren't getting oxygen. Things that the blood is supposed to be transporting that oxygen to, it's not getting out of the transport system if there's not CO2 there, or enough CO2. It might just be getting out inefficiently, right? You'd be dead if no oxygen was getting out. But
well, that's the thing, yeah. And we need, it's the system is very well built and very finely built to notice any changes in the kind of buildup of CO2. And for a lot of the time, it's it's telling people to dump it because they'll need to dump it, But it's just we become very sensitive to the buildup of the CO2. And people know what this feels like. And this can be quite a big aha moment for people. Like when people feel the buildup of carbon dioxide in their blood, they associate it with that feeling, or well, it is that feeling for most of breathlessness, the feeling of air hunger. For so many people, they're thinking when they feel that they're needing to get more oxygen in or more air in. And this is a big one for people to kind of get to be aware of. That feeling of air hunger, that feeling of breathlessness when you're gasping for air. People think that that's about getting oxygen in, and it's not. It's about getting the carbon dioxide out. That's what that feeling is all about, So when people can click with that, and they can understand that this is maybe a bit of a load, provided they're in good health, obviously, they're not pregnant and all these kind of things that you'd have to cover first, then, we can lean into that load to reset the breathing center in the brain to be a bit more efficient so that we're breathing more efficiently all the time. And that has a huge kind of psychological, physiological health and well-being benefit,
Yeah, and of course it can be pushed too far, right? Like James Nestor talks about the free divers who, free diving is when you basically scuba dive without a tank and you just hold your breath, and they train themselves. I think they do it like 5, 6, 7 minutes at a time, holding their breath underwater. And some of these people get so desensitized to that feeling of what we call air hunger, but it's really carbon dioxide excess, I suppose, that the signal never kicks in all the way to the point where they die. So what is it about carbon dioxide building up in your blood? Like those free divers who die from excess carbon dioxide in their blood, what is it about the carbon dioxide that kills them?
Yeah, they become too acidic. So the pH balance changes and the acidity level within the blood just gets, or within them just gets so high that the bodily systems just start to shut down. So we have a range, right? And we're very finely tuned to notice subtle, tiny little differences in the change of the pH, the acid base of the blood. If we've got more carbon dioxide in the blood, we become more acidic. And if there's not enough carbon dioxide in the blood, or there's very little carbon dioxide in the blood, we become very alkaline. So I think they call them like hypo and hypercapnic states. Hypocapnic is less carbon dioxide. Hypercapnic is a lot of carbon dioxide. Hypocapnic is not enough carbon dioxide. But basically, there's a pH range, and we have to stay within this range. And if we get too acidic or we get too alkaline, the bodily systems just can't function properly, and then some stuff starts to go wrong, and we
So,
can die. So you need
so
to
how
be
would
very careful.
how would somebody know? Let's say they're doing oxygen advantage breath work, or they're starting to train their qigong or their yoga in a way that pushes into that air hunger feeling. They're really lengthening their
Yeah.
breaths. How would somebody know if they're getting into a dangerous range where their brain has become too desensitized to carbon dioxide, where now they're starting
Yeah.
to become too acidic in their blood and their brain can't tell anymore?
Yeah. So, I mean, what can start to happen once we start to push say the breath holding, for example, too far,
Mhm.
is that
Yeah.
yeah, the carbon dioxide levels, the hypercapnic state, if you like, as it goes up, carbon dioxide's going up, going up, going up. We're feeling air hunger, we're leaning into it, we're keeping going, and we're kind of desensitizing ourselves to this feeling. We keep going, we keep going, we
Mhm.
keep going. What's obviously happening at
Yeah.
the same time, because it is breath holding, is the oxygen levels are going down and down, and eventually going down and down and down. You don't tend to
Mm.
notice that is happening. You notice the feeling of the increased CO2. You don't notice the
Right.
feeling of the decreasing O2. However, your system knows
Right.
it's happening because you're not getting any oxygen in. So then what happens?
Right.
It'll shut you down, and it'll take your legs
Mhm.
away from you, and you'll black out because your oxygen levels
Mhm.
are going down so far. The system will just be, well,
Mhm.
we've had enough of this. So then it'll take you out, and that's why there has been situations when people have been practicing this kind of stuff near water and they've drowned. The reason they've drowned is
So
because
it's the
they've been
so it's actually the
underwater.
water that
When,
so it's the
yeah,
water that kills the free divers. If they
the
did that on
water, I
land,
think
they
a
would
lot
just
of the
pass out and
time,
wake up.
yeah, because they haven't passed out. I mean,
Wow.
I've seen a situation once where somebody's pushed it way too far. Or heard about a situation where somebody's pushed it way too far and their legs have gone away from them, and they've
Mm.
collapsed. So that's kind of been seen,
Mm.
but I've not seen, but it has happened. The situations where people have done it near water and they've just blacked out underwater and they've drowned essentially because yeah,
Oh,
their
that's
oxygen
terrible.
levels got a bit too low. So you've got to be super careful with it. Never extreme.
Yeah.
With all of this, never push into the extremes, because what's the point? We want to be able to lean in to the feeling of being uncomfortable, becoming a little bit more comfortable there, in order to reset efficiency. That doesn't need to be
Mm.
extreme. You're talking like,
Yeah.
30 seconds or so. You can also use pulse oximetry to stick a little pulse oximeter
Mhm.
on your finger. You can use
Oh yeah.
that to kind of gauge blood oxygen saturation, and from there you can kind of, you've got a little bit of a measure or a metric to use to be able to kind of keep
Right.
safe. But for most people, what would be gauging them to do is just be aware of the feeling of the hunger of air and just kind of sitting with it, not pushing it to the extreme, just being aware of it, allowing it to build, and that can be done in a variety of different ways. I know we'd spoken about to kind of softening the breath through Qigong movements as a way to be able to feel
Mm.
that hunger build and kind of sitting with
Mhm.
that. That can be a nice way, but never pushing into the extremes, because what's the point?
Right. I would imagine it'd take a lot of training. It'd be pretty hard to get to the point where you had overdone that. I imagine
Yes,
the one person that you've seen do that probably pushed it pretty extreme.
yes. Well,
Yeah.
he was a solo free climber. And,
Uh, well,
there's something that goes on within their minds that they push
yeah.
themselves very far,
Yeah.
but it's not to be done to the extremes. We want to keep it
Right.
safe. We have to keep it sensible, because we are, we are kind of using a real load here. The increase in CO2 can really be panic inducing as well. And for a lot of the oxygen advantage techniques, what I like to focus on is the way to engage more of a parasympathetic tone in the nervous system, rest and digest, de-stress. The breath holding stuff is a lot more stressy. It can become quite stressful. And for some, a simple breath
Right.
hold of 20 seconds, 10 seconds even, maybe even less than that with some, can cause that kind of panic-induced feeling to kick in. So we really want to focus
Mm.
on breathing mechanical efficiency and just chemical breathing efficiency before we start kind of pushing into these other zones. And that just starts with kind of simple nasal breathing, making sure we're using our diaphragm. A lot of the stuff that you teach as well, man, you know, just ensuring that the chemical pieces are in place, that we're breathing lightly, that we're breathing softly. And then once we've got that into that right kind of zone, then, you know, we can start to lean into the feeling of being uncomfortable a bit more. But I always like to get the kind of basics right before we start diving into the other stuff, you know?
Yeah. And, I've read some articles about that even though the feeling of that overdose of CO2, like the brain sensing there's too much CO2 in the body, that does produce, like there's situations that can produce extreme anxiety. There's machines that you can go to where it's like a medical procedure to desensitize you to CO2. And the way they do it is you literally breathe like pure CO2 in through a tube. And people say it's like the most panic they've ever felt in their life, the feeling that you get from that. But the paradox is, as it desensitizes your brain to it and your blood starts to hold more CO2 just in your day-to-day life when you're not even thinking about breathing, because you went through those extreme CO2 overdoses and you're desensitized, in your day-to-day life, you actually have less anxiety, like less just general background anxiety, because your blood is holding more CO2. That CO2 actually has an anti-anxiety effect so long as your brain is not overreacting to it.
Yeah, I think there's so much interesting stuff in that with the conditioning of the brain to take these, what we might call like fight or flight responses, but you flip them and you turn them into a more kind of rest and digest thing. I see it in the cold water sometimes with when you're using HRV to kind of measure that. So it's quite an interesting one. But yeah, I think that the carbon dioxide, they sometimes say it can have a vagal-tropic effect, so that kind of vagal tone, that parasympathetic stimulation through what they call like the vagus nerve. The CO2 can have quite an interesting effect on that. I've noticed doing some deeper breath holds, I've seen HRV, which is a kind of measure of stress in the nervous system. Or a measure of rest and digest or fight and flight, you might say. I've noticed when you do deeper breath holds, sometimes that can go up, not all the time. It kind of can depend. It's quite an interesting one, but yeah, I think definitely the conditioning of the system to be more tolerant to the carbon dioxide has wide-reaching benefits to it, but we just got to do it in a sensible manner so that people are safe, basically.
Cool. Well, that brings me to the last thing I wanted to ask you about. You're telling me you're doing some HRV testing on yourself for Qigong and breathwork and stuff. So I was curious what you're measuring and how that's panning out.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that. So one of the fields that I got really interested in was heart rate variability. So for those people that aren't aware of what that is, we can just call it it's a measurement of stress within the nervous system. People have usually heard of like fight or flight or rest and digest tone, if you like, within the nervous system. And HRV gives us insight or a window into kind of measuring that. I really liked it because it gives us a great tool to be able to show how certain practices can be affecting the system. Are they stressing us out? Are they inducing more kind of stress, to put it very simply? And I was playing around with a lot of the breathwork stuff from OA, light, slow, deep breathing, very effective at being able to create more rest and digest, but so is the Qigong. And I've noticed that to be really potent as a way to be able to increase that rest and digest tone in the nervous system. Just some simple movements that I was kind of learning from yourself, you know. And the way that I would measure, I would take a reading, check my stress levels, if you like, before I would practice. And then I would practice, and then I would take the reading again, and I would see the kind of differences. And it's substantial for the majority of the time. With HRV, it's not always every time for everyone, because we're all individuals and we all have different, you know, they're all different. So that does play into it. But I certainly noticed that the Qigong was having some, like, a considerable benefit to the state of my nervous system, and it's cool when you can measure it as well. So yeah, that's been really great to see, because once you see the data combined with the subjective experience, then it can just be a helpful catalyst to keep you doing the stuff. And I've noticed that to be great. I think you also condition your nervous system to be less stressed the more of it that you do. So the more you practice, the more it's like sending the signal of safety through the movement practices, through the breath at the end. The more of that you do, your nervous system just gets more used to it. And then so you're conditioning it like you're conditioning anything. So I think that's been it's a great one to help you keep practicing for me anyway. So I love to show people about it. So if anyone's ever keen to hear more, let me know.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I've found for these kind of things too. Meditation, Qigong, all of it. It's not like every practice is equal. Like you can have like a 10-minute Qigong practice, for instance, and you do it today and you feel a little bit better or maybe not or whatever. But that 10-minute practice is not equal to the same 10-minute practice if you had just done that 5 days in a row.
Yeah.
Right. It builds on itself. It's like a snowball effect. So there really is there's almost more benefit to the consistency than the intensity of it, right? People always ask like, how often should I practice? How often should I practice? And I think people have it in their head that like anything you do that's like exercise needs to be an hour because that's how long it is at like a gym or a yoga studio. Like they have these hour slots. But I think better if you can't get yourself to do an hour every day, you can get yourself to do 10 minutes every day. I think the 10 minutes will be better than an hour, right? But I was really noticing that too. You got me inspired when you were telling me about this HRV stuff. So I went out and bought a Whoop band, which is not an ad for Whoop bands. I did get a lot of good info, but it also gave me weird burns on my skin. Like it shines weird light into your blood vessels.
It does,
for whatever reason, I was getting skin burns from it. So I've never heard of anybody else getting that. But the data from it was really cool. But my wife made me stop wearing it after a couple months. I'm like, I swear these skin burns are going to stop. My skin will get used to it. My skin never got used to it. So cool. I just wound up with both wrists, just wound up with all these burns on it. But the data, I did really notice the HRV in relation to like how consistently I was practicing. My practice has become extremely inconsistent since I'm having a baby and my wife went through a lot of postpartum stuff. So when I'm able to get into like a consistent routine, even of just 10 or 20 minutes a day, of Qigong and meditation and stuff, I could see that after it didn't really happen right away. I couldn't like notice it like minute for minute, like, at 5 o'clock I did Qigong and at 6 o'clock, like my HRV was better. But it was like after 2 or 3 days of having consistent practice, I could really see the HRV changing. And I really noticed subjectively that HRV marker was such a hugely correlated to my subjective feeling of stress. That's cool stuff.
It's cool. It's super cool. And when people start to do that and it clicks, then it can just be such a great catalyst for more practice. I've seen so many great things with it. The Qigong was really worked well, especially out in nature, man. Like I was doing some other interesting like just experiments, and I would even just go and sit outside. Sorry, go and sit inside, take a reading, do a little bit of like even 3 minutes worth of Qigong, and then sit outside. The difference that made to the HRV, I mean, it was jumping up like 100% sometimes, and that's not normal. I mean, I took it across the board to like real like experts, like global experts in the field, to be like, what's going on here? What's happening when we're outside that's causing this to happen? Because the kit I was using was all pretty decent stuff, and they're not sure. I spoke to like Clint Ober and Ben Greenfield, and Jay Wiles was also working with Greenfield. He taught me a lot, and we're not 100% sure to pinpoint exactly what's going on there, but there's something happening outside, man. It's very interesting. And when you combine it with the Qigong, when you combine it with Oxygen Advantage, kind of style, light, slow, deep breathing, when all that's which Qigong will, be doing anyway, when you do that together and you compile it over time, it has a really big benefit on how we handle stress for our lives, and I think the more people can have these tools to see the benefit of this stuff, hopefully the more and more people are going to be getting involved, because it's a big one, and it does improve quality of life. So it's great to be talking about it, and great to be sharing it with people, mate.
Yeah, nature is such a medicine. It seems like we understand so little about. I think there's I mean, there's so many studies on HRV with like the electromagnetic field of the heart. Like I remember
Yeah,
reading, I think it was the Heart Math Institute was studying
yeah,
it, and they'd put people in separate rooms with like a concrete wall between them. And when one person's HRV would change, maybe they shock them or surprise them or make them laugh or whatever, it would actually affect the other person who had no idea what was going on in the other room.
yeah,
I think they found the field of the heart, it was like 12 feet around the body. I don't know what that is
yeah,
in meters in Scotland, but
yeah,
maybe 3 meters or something.
yeah, something along there.
But maybe something like that's happening in nature. You know, maybe all the trees have electromagnetic fields, and the earth does, and the grass does, and who
You
knows.
know, who
But
knows,
my
man?
yoga teacher was telling me, my yoga teacher Ian Finn was telling me about a study, because I think people think like when it's like, oh, I need to get to nature for the health benefits, they think like I need to go to Mexico and sit on the beach for a week, you know,
All
or
right, yeah, yeah,
like I need to go camping. Like it's like kind of like
yeah,
this
yeah,
big thing, like got to get to the nature, you know.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
my yoga teacher was telling me about a study where they were looking at affordable housing units in the U.S., like in like the inner cities where there was a lot of crime, and a lot of these like government housing projects. Um, they noticed a correlation between the number of trees in front of the housing projects and the amount of crime. And there was something, it was some insane number. It was like 20 times more murder or something at the apartments that had no trees versus the ones that had trees. I should
No,
really look up that study to verify it. He's a pretty smart guy, but
oh
maybe I'll ask
yeah,
him to send it to me.
there's
But
something going
you
on.
know, maybe it's just that simple. Going for a walk like down the sidewalk where there's some
Oh,
trees. You know,
easy.
maybe that's all it
Yeah,
takes.
you know, and great to go out and, you know, find a place out, you know, and go traveling to get there and you immerse yourself in nature for a period of time. Brilliant. But does everybody
Yeah,
have the
even better.
opportunity to do that all the time? They don't always have the opportunity. Great to go on retreat, great to do it all and really experience it and immerse yourself in it. Fantastic. And people should definitely, you know, give that a shot because the immersion makes a big difference. But
Yeah.
you can still get a benefit from just being outside in your backyard or in a local park or wherever it may be. You know, just get near it. If you can see it, you know, it tends to be there and you're going to get some benefit from it. But yeah, I've seen some really super interesting stuff happening out in nature to again just help me to keep keep going out there, keep practicing out there because subjectively the feelings tend to be there, but it gives it this other objective piece that can just help the
Hmm.
whole thing along a bit more and just keep you consistent with practicing well, you know. There's so much more that feeds into HRV than just that, you know. There's all kind of a whole fitness aspect, the sleep aspect, there's a diet thing, relationship thing, so many things affect it. So it's cool to be aware of it, but I've certainly seen some really potent stuff with practicing alongside everything that you've been doing, mate. So no, it's been great to be using that in conjunction with the other stuff. Super cool.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thanks for destroying your personal brand by mixing your science-based breath work with my woo-woo energy
It's all
Qigong
right.
magical practices.
Don't you worry about that. No, I think they
Thanks
work
so much
together
for coming on.
seamlessly, mate.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of those who can afford by time or finances, I suppose, to be able to go on retreats to beautiful places in nature, Andrew does offer Oxygen Advantage Instructor certification programs in Scotland at his castle style manor, I've been calling it. So if you want to check that out, head to performancebreathworks.com. We'll link that below. And you can get certified with Andrew in Scotland. Pretty sweet place in nature on a loch out in the mountains in Scotland. It's just incredible. And if you want to train with me and Andrew, not to get certified, but just for sort of a nature and healing experience, we'll be running a retreat, or I'll be running a retreat, but Andrew will be teaching Oxygen Advantage at it, and also providing us with some hot cold therapy. They got wood stove saunas and an ice cold lock to dip into. And his mom will be cooking a Blue Zones inspired longevity diet for us all. So we'll be running that in 2025. We actually only have one spot left, so we're probably going to open up a wait list to have a second week. We filled up in about 3 or 4 days for this first week retreat, so we'll probably open up a second. So let us know at support@nicklawfree.com if you'd be interested in us opening up another week for you to attend. But otherwise, thanks so much, Andrew, for joining me.
Pleasure. Thank you.
You can also train with me and Andrew just right here on YouTube with our Qigong and Breathwork video we just posted a few days ago. We'll link that as well below. And we're coming out. We have another one coming out in a couple weeks as well, part 2 to that. So look out for that. Anything else you want to direct people to, Andrew?
No, that's all good. If anybody's keen to hear more about heart rate variability or any of those pieces, you can get me on Performance Breathworks, either on Instagram, performance_breathworks, or online, www.performancebreathworks.com. We'll get you there too. And yeah, hopefully see you soon. But thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk, Nick, and looking forward to seeing you again soon, mate.